It wasn't just one Terminator that's being torn apart in this movie. There was several. Each one of those versions of the Terminator needed to have a series of makeups.
The request was try to stay in the vein of the originals. Fortunately enough, we were able to work directly from the original live cast and then a new one.
Arnold, the man himself, had to come in. We did a head scan of him, so we had 3D data, and we also did old-fashioned life casts of him, because both things provide valuable data for when you're trying to put an appliance together.
We had life casts of Arnold, we had a couple scans of Arnold, so we took them all into ZBrush, cleaned them all up, made them all nice, and then took an endo skull, put that inside, and started carving it down like you would with clay, like they did on the original.
What you have to keep in mind as you're tearing this stuff away, does he look strong? Does this make him look weak? There's certain things that you can get away with just a pure prosthetic that you can shoot in camera and it holds up. If you're taking a whole chunk of a cheek or something away, in the old days you couldn't take away, obviously, from a face, so you would build it up and it would only work from certain angles. Nowadays, what's beautiful working in conjunction with CG, doing hybrid makeups, you could give the leading edge of where it's going to be torn and then paint the whole inside green. And they would put in proper endoskeleton detail instead of everything just being a cheat. Once those designs are set, and the sculptors and sculpt the actual prosthetics of what they're going to look like in clay. Once they're done, those are then turned back over to the mold department and they make molds on them. And the type of appliance determines the type of mold. You've got the team that are running all of these appliances. All the prosthetics that we're talking about here, once they're glued down, there's nothing reusable. And you have to figure out how many appliances, and there's literally several thousand that were run for this. Another big build for us was the 1984 Arnold, as he was called. They're toting the corpse of this thing around in the back of this armored car. Part of his face has been sheared off and he's been shot. It made sense to make a prosthetic dummy of this. How to end up with a 1984 Arnold was an interesting process. We started with a scanned body that we had made back on T3.
We had a body scan of Arnold, so I have all the arm lengths, wrist lengths, shoulder lengths, and everything. Then it's just packing on clay to bulk him up, and it was just box after box after box of clay.
Getting the likeness and the look of it was one thing. Then getting it to be molded and then to cast it in a material that was convincing. Very tricky. You had to put a little bit of a muscle structure so that when the arms moved, it held its position correctly. Then you have to cast that skeleton into that body so that you've got the joints exactly where they need to be moving. And then it becomes a process of paintwork on it.
After we cast the body, I took it and I cut off the nose and we cut out parts of his skull and face and exposed different things.
To put the hair on it, that got replicated by one hair at a time being punched into the silicone to achieve, I think, a highly realistic replica. The T800 endoskeleton, there was many incarnations we made for the film, so it had to be re-engineered from the standpoint of being something that you could actually build and work with. You got to think about in the human body, there's 206 bones, so there's that many mechanical parts plus more. That's a task in itself, to go through and clean this stuff up, get it ready to rapid prototype.
In the T800, there's an extreme amount of high-resolution detail parts. We use our polyjet machines. They print at 16 micron, so everything that the artist puts their blood, sweat, and tears into on that screen is going to come through in the print.
Once those parts are grown, they need to get cleaned up. Our model shop department gets every part back and inspects it, takes it up to a spit polish shine, and then it goes to mold. After all of our experience doing robots and Iron Men and all these things, we work out different lighter weight materials, urethanes, different durometers, types of materials that we have figured out how to make look like metal.
Real chrome is really hard to photograph. Our painted solution looks like real metal in camera, but it's a little faster. We have control of it in the shop as opposed to sending it out.
It has little accents of gray throughout the body, which adds a little bit more color and separation of pieces. Always cool to work on an iconic character and still hold true to the original one as well.
Once they come back from the paint department, then we have to go through and start building it around the armature that the mechanics have made. The guys are very meticulous in putting all of these hundreds of parts of a Terminator back together again.
Nearly all the time when you see the endoskeleton, it's CG. When they're used practically is when people are handling them. They basically are highly detailed props, doubling as CG reference. Genesis really paid homage to the things that Jim had created and what Stan and all of us did. It really feels connected to those, and I'm really glad to have been a part of that.